When you picture a sadistic killer, who do you see? Statistically, it's usually a man. But history proves that the capacity for absolute evil isn't limited by gender. Today, we are diving into the darkest corners of true crime to uncover the stories of those who shattered every stereotype of the gentle sex. These aren't just murderers. These are 18 terrible women who tortured people to death. Rosa Baca. Our list begins in California with a case from 2018 that highlights the cruelty of indifference. Rosa Baca was convicted of the first-degree murder of her boyfriend. What makes this case qualify as torture was not just the assault itself, which involved a hammer, but what happened after. The court found that after inflicting catastrophic injuries, Baca did not call 911. Instead, she allowed the victim to suffer for hours, bleeding and in agony, before he finally succumbed. The jury found that this waiting period demonstrated a clear intent to cause extreme pain, elevating the charge to murder with the special circumstance of torture. Natalie Vinge. Christmas Day is supposed to be a time of peace, but in Calgary in 2016, it was the setting for a nightmare. Natalie Vinge, along with accomplices, turned a suburban garage into a torture chamber. The victim was Tammy Howard. Vinge participated in holding Howard captive, where she was hung from the rafters and subjected to a 12-hour ordeal that included beatings and the use of a nail gun. The sheer duration of the assault places this case on our list. Vinge eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, admitting her role in the assault that ended Howard's life. Michelle Notek. In Washington State, Michelle Shelley Notek presented herself as a mother and wife, but inside her home, she was running a house of horrors. Along with her husband, Notek took in boarders, vulnerable people looking for a place to stay. Instead of shelter, victims Kathy Loreno and Ronald Woodworth found slavery. Notek subjected them to years of psychological and physical torture, forcing them to wallow in mud, endure starvation, and perform humiliating labor. Both victims died from the abuse. The most chilling aspect? Notek forced her own children to facilitate the abuse and cover up the crimes. The truth only surfaced years later when her daughters finally broke their silence. Krista Pike. Age is no barrier to sadism. In 1995, Krista Pike became the youngest woman sent to death row in the United States. She was only 18. Motivated by jealousy and a desire for control, she and her boyfriend lured 19-year-old classmate Colleen Slemmer to a remote, paved area in the woods. For 30 minutes, Pike orchestrated a brutal assault, slashing the victim and eventually ending her life with a chunk of asphalt. Pike's arrogance was her undoing. She kept a piece of the victim's skull as a souvenir to show off to friends, a grim trophy that led directly to her arrest. Annalisa Coleman. We now move back in time to the darkness of World War II. The Nazi regime provided a sanctioned outlet for sadists, and Annalise Coleman was one of them. Serving as a guard at camps near Hamburg and later Bergen-Belsen, Coleman was known for her explosive violence. She would whip prisoners across the face and kick them until they were unconscious. While her prison sentence after the war was shorter than others, just 2 years, survivor testimonies consistently group her with the most terrifying female guards. She represents how quickly ordinary people can become monsters when given unchecked authority. Wanna Borman. Another figure from the camps was Wanna Borman, known grimly as the woman with the dogs. Serving at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, Borman didn't just use her hands to inflict pain. She weaponized animals. Witnesses at her trial testified that she took pleasure in setting her trained German shepherds on prisoners who were too weak to work, encouraging the animals to maul them. Her cruelty was calculated and detached. She was convicted of war crimes and executed in 1945. Elizabeth Brownrigg. In 18th century London, the parish orphan system was designed to help the poor, but for Elizabeth Brownrigg, it was a supply chain for victims. A respected midwife, she was appointed to oversee orphan apprentices. In 1767, neighbors raised the alarm. It was discovered that Brownrigg stripped, chained, and whipped her apprentices for days on end. Her victim, Mary Clifford, died from infected wounds caused by this systematic torture. Brownrigg's execution at Tyburn was a massive public spectacle. The crowd despised her so much that they cheered as she was hanged, a testament to how deeply her cruelty shocked the Georgian era. Elizabeth Branch. Wealth often protects people from the law, but not in the case of Elizabeth Branch and her daughter Mary. In 1740s England, these two women were notorious for their tyranny over their servants. Their violence escalated to murder when their 13-year-old servant, Jane Buttersworth, took too long to run an errand. In a fit of rage, the mother and daughter beat the child relentlessly for hours until she died. They tried to bury the body in secret, but neighbors intervened. Their execution was a rare moment where the landed gentry faced the same justice as the common criminal. Karla Homolka. Canada doesn't get angry often, but mention the name Karla Homolka and you'll see the rage. They called her and her husband, Paul Bernardo, the Cannon Barbie killers. Pretty faces hiding ugly souls. 3 girls dead, tortured, including Homolka's own flesh and blood, her sister Tammy. She played the system like a fiddle, crying "battered wife" and cutting a plea deal. The press called it a deal with the devil. It looked like she might get away with the Victim Act until the tapes surfaced. No coercion there, just 2 predators enjoying their work. She's out of prison now, back on the streets, leaving a trail of fury that no amount of time can wash away. Teresa Knorr. If a mother's job is to protect, Teresa Knorr is the ultimate anomaly. In the 1980s, this American woman turned her home into a prison for her children. Knorr didn't just kill. She crafted complex, long-term torture scenarios. She shot her daughter Susan, then nursed her back to health, only to burn her alive later. She locked her daughter Sheila in a closet with no food until she starved to death. Her crimes were only discovered when her surviving daughters, terrified but desperate, went to the police years later. Myra Hindley. In the United Kingdom, Myra Hindley is often called the most hated woman in Britain. As one half of the Moors murderers with Ian Brady, she kidnapped and murdered 5 children in the 1960s. The couple recorded the torture of one of their young victims on tape, a recording so disturbing that it reduced seasoned police officers to tears. Hindley spent decades trying to appeal her sentence, claiming she was reformed, but the sheer brutality of the torture she facilitated ensured she died behind bars.
Rosemary West. Rosemary West, along with her husband Fred, turned 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester into a graveyard. West tortured and murdered at least 10 young women, including her own stepdaughter. The victims were often sexually abused and dismembered, their remains buried in the cellar or under the garden patio. Unlike some partners who claim coercion, Rosemary was identified as an equal, if not dominant partner in the cruelty. She was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning she will never be released. Gertrude Banaszewski. This case is often cited as the single worst crime in Indiana history. Gertrude Banaszewski was a mother of 7 who took in a boarder, 16-year-old Sylvia Likens. What followed was a descent into madness. Banaszewski didn't just torture Likens, she encouraged her own children and the neighborhood kids to join in. Over several months, Sylvia was beaten, starved, burned, and mutilated in the basement. It was a mob mentality orchestrated by one woman. The psychological horror of a neighborhood secret makes this case particularly haunting. Irma Grese. We return to the Holocaust for the hyena of Auschwitz, Irma Grese. She was young, executed at just 22, but her reputation was ancient in its cruelty. Survivors testified that Grese derived visible, sexual pleasure from the suffering of others. She would whip prisoners and select victims for the gas chambers based on whim. She stands as a terrifying example of psychopathy unleashed by a totalitarian regime. Ilse Koch. Known as the Witch of Buchenwald, Ilse Koch was the wife of the camp commandant. While her husband ran the camp, Ilse terrorized it. She was infamous for her sadistic hobbies, specifically the allegation that she selected inmates with interesting tattoos to be killed so she could collect their skin as lampshades or book covers. While some specific claims were debated in later trials, her conviction for inciting murder and grievous bodily harm was cemented by the sheer volume of testimony against her. Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova. In 18th century Russia, Daria Saltykova, known as the Salty Chica, proved that absolute power corrupts absolutely. A noblewoman, she owned serfs who had no legal rights. Over several years, she tortured and killed dozens of them, mostly young women. She would throw boiling water on them, beat them with logs, or leave them naked in the freezing Russian winter. She was eventually convicted of 38 murders, though the real number is likely much higher. She spent the rest of her life in a convent dungeon, a rare case of the Tsar intervening against the nobility. Delphine Lalaurie. If you visit New Orleans today, the Lalaurie Mansion is a top tourist stop. But in 1834, it was the site of a discovery that sparked a riot. Madame Lalaurie was a socialite known for her charm. But when a fire broke out, rescuers found a secret attic room. Inside were enslaved people bound in stress positions, their bodies broken by months or years of calculated mutilation. The cruelty was so shocking that a mob of New Orleans citizens, who were themselves slave owners, stormed the house to destroy it. Lalaurie fled to France and, frustratingly, never faced justice. Elizabeth Báthory. And finally, at number 1, the woman who holds the Guinness World Record for the most prolific female murderer, the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Báthory. A Hungarian noblewoman in the late 16th century, Báthory is surrounded by myth, the most famous being that she bathed in blood to stay young. But the historical truth is even worse than the myth. Testimony from her trial described how she tortured hundreds of young girls within her castle walls, burning them, freezing them, and starving them. Because of her high status, she was never executed, but was walled up inside her own castle, where she remained until her death. These 18 women challenge our understanding of human nature. They remind us that the capacity for evil is not determined by gender, but by the individual's choice to inflict pain. From the abuses of power in concentration camps to the betrayal of trust in the family home, these cases remain etched in history as warnings of what happens when empathy is entirely extinguished. If you found this deep dive interesting, please like and subscribe for more historical and true crime documentaries. And let us know in the comments, which of these cases do you find the most disturbing? Thanks for watching.